Well, morning everybody. It's that time of year now. Getting started on corn silage. We're gonna start down there at the North Farm, Mom and Dad's place. So, Dad's headed down there with a chopper and wagon. I got a tractor and wagon down there already. So, gonna hop in a truck here, run down the road. We're gonna get started.
We try to plant the corn that we need for silage on each farm so we don't have to truck it very far. And this year the corn for this silo is on this hill. This hill presents itself with some challenges, erosion being the biggest one. There's a big waterway that goes down through this farm, or this hill, and contour strips. And the reason for the contour strips is to keep the speed of the water down. So it has to break each time it crosses a strip. It changes the speed of the water. It changes the topography of the land, whether it be no-till beans or corn or wheat or whatever it is. And that helps change things up, so it helps slow the water flow down. But for chopping corn the way we do, it presents itself with some challenges. This chopper turns really sharp. And I've got myself in trouble a couple times. I've been a couple tongues. I have to watch that I don't turn as sharp as I can because the wagons can't turn that sharp. The other challenge it presents is there's a road right beside me here, so when I turn into the end of the field and I fire the chopper up, I have to make sure that the spout is going to hit the wagon and not hit the road. And I have decorated the road a couple times today. Fortunately, no cars were involved, but it happens. The next thing is it makes it challenging to find which row you're on while you're turning into it. We've learned over the years that you want to function clockwise on these strips. The strips are on an angle. Got about a 37-45 degree angle on the end of the field. So it works best if you turn on the shorter side of that angle. Your implement tends to follow you a little bit better. It's easier to track with the wagon with the spout if you do it that way. These strips aren't real wide, maybe 100 feet wide, 90, 100 feet wide. When you're chopping these strips, when you get down to the center of a strip, gets narrow, I always start another strip and then come back on the strip preceding, so I don't bend the tongue on the wagon. You can't turn that sharp with these wagons. So then you're starting to go down one and back another. The other challenge it presents is changing wagons. When we started this process this morning, down at the bottom of the hill, we really had nowhere to change wagons nicely. The neighboring business across the road there has a big horseshoe-shaped driveway and loading dock area and so forth, so we kind of borrowed that. We drove over there and did our wagon switch in there for about 4 loads until we had enough room cut that we could change on our property. 7 or 8 years ago, preceding this Claas chopper, we had a uni system chopper, 3-row head, and that 3-row head, our wagons would barely fit behind the chopper, so on this side hill, you had to be very careful to go straight, and when you're planting, not to crowd things, because your wagon wouldn't fit, then you'd be running corn down, and there's no profit in running corn down on the ground. You want to pick it up and put it in the wagon. This chopper here has a 4-row head, which makes it a lot nicer for the wagon. We got 4 rows back here for the wagon to fit. But with a 6-row planter, it makes it a little challenging. I'm not the best planter in the world, I've tried. This head is pretty forgiving. It's a very nice corn head, Claas 4-row row head. It tends to like it better if it's a little too narrow than if it's too wide. So if I'm going to make any kind of a mistake, I'd rather drive a little close than a little far. I seem to be able to crowd the corn in, or out rather, in the center of the head better than I can crowd the corn in on the outside. You can understand what I'm saying. The other thing that poses a challenge at both ends of the field, there's an obstacle at that end, south side, there's a big deep ditch. And you have to realize when you turn your chopper, it's like you're wagging the tail on a dog. You're wagging your wagon out. So you have to turn back far enough that you don't throw your wagon in the ditch. And likewise on the other end of the farm, at the other end of the hill here, we have our pasture field, fence posts, and then down below there's also a creek. So there you also have to bear in mind that you're throwing that wagon over so you don't throw it into the fence or drop it in the creek. Since these strips are narrow, we change at the one end of the field all the time. So we change at one round regardless as to how full the wagon is. The strips down on the east side are shorter, wagons tend to not be quite as full. The strips up on the west side here are longer, so they'll be a little fuller. How full the wagons are depends on how good the corn is. In a real good year, you can only put 6 rows on there approximately. This year, the corn was planted a little bit later. It had some challenges, so I'm able to get 8 rows on the load.
Well, it's falling morning. Got about 29 loads in yesterday afternoon. I didn't bother boring you guys with filming every single bit of that. So we're back at it again this morning. Gonna try to get this thing full, set up, and ready to run today. So Dad's headed to the field with the chopper. I'm grabbing a 7 in a wagon. We're gonna meet him out there. So let's get after it. Well, we wrapped up filling this silo, set it up, run it. So we ran a little bit there in the bunk for the cows to nibble on whenever they decided to come in from the pasture. But that project's finished up, so got a little bit of time left in the day. It's still daylight. They were calling for rain, but looks like we can possibly stay dry for a moment. So we're gonna take the Ranger back to the woods and go grab a load of firewood.
This farm we bought in 1997 has a 31-acre woods on it, and I remember driving by it for years thinking that somebody ought to clean that up because there's a lot of down trees in there. I never dreamed it was going to be me. But when we bought it, the couple we bought it from, we bought it on land contract, and they treated us very fairly, I thought at the time. And Lester was a good guy to work with, and he said what would help me make my first year's payment would be if we harvested some timber. He had never had anyone in here. He couldn't get around very well. He didn't trust people because you can have some shysters screw up your woods if you aren't watching them. So he suggested that I take some timber out to make my first year's payment. So we began the process of researching to find someone reputable. We contacted the state forester and got a list of names, and on that list there was a fellow by the name of Eldon Cherry, who turned out to be well known by some people that I respected pretty well, their opinions, and they couldn't say enough good about him. So we had him come out, and we walked the woods and we marked 148 trees, I think. It seems like a lot, but there was a lot in here that was mature. This woods had never been logged to my knowledge to any degree. So anyway, so came the process of logging the woods. They got the logs pulled out, and he said there's a couple ways we can do this. He said we can either pull them out and have someone bid on them, or we can have just get a couple buyers and pick the highest bidder and then let him take it all. So our plan was to let them bid on it. And it was Christmas Eve that year, 1997. He called me. I remember we were getting ready to go to church, and he said, Brian, he said, I had a guy call me from North Carolina, and he's hurting for timber. He says, it's muddy down there, they can't get any timber, and he says he's really hurting. He said he gave me a ridiculous number for your logs. He said, and my gut tells me if I was you, I would take it. I said, well, I value your opinion because this is your business and I trust what you're telling me. So we did. We took the guy's money, his offer, accepted his offer on 148 logs. Well, there are a few logs that had not yet been harvested at that time. Some of those logs fell apart when they hit the ground, but the guy had signed the contract, and so he had to pay us the money. There was about 6 logs he actually didn't get because they blew up. They were damaged, and they were huge trees, and when they hit the ground they exploded. So we came out smelling pretty good. Well, then the process of cleanup, and I had always cut wood and enjoyed cutting wood, but I never did it to any large scale. My dad burned wood at home. Elmer Mulata, an older fella, a friend of his up the road here just a little bit, burned wood. And I had neighbors over north of me that burned wood, so we began the process of cleaning it up. And we had a fairly mild winter and had a lot of people working in here. My dad, my father-in-law, myself, a couple of employees would come once in a while, Elmer, some neighbors, take some. And we got through it. It took several years. But I learned how to do it from those guys. We cut the trees and we maintain, there's roads in these woods. I guess it's the logging trails that they established the first time, and we maintain them as roads. And every time they come in there, I have them drop the logs on those roads. We begin on the outside and work our way back in. So we maintain a trail, and so you don't have a bunch of growth occurring there, and you can use it for access to get stuff in and out of here. So we started on the outside, worked our way in, and we cut the wood. We cut it down to 2 or 3 inches. I get guilty of cutting it too small sometimes. And the first thing we do is we cut it, and Elmer said to stack it on poles. So what poles are is we take branches that are a couple inches too small for firewood, and we use that for like a runner to lay the wood on. And we'll put it between trees, and we'll use trees for like bookends. And you'll see here in a little bit there's some piles we're going to get to that have trees, and that keeps the pile straight. The poles keep it up off the ground so it doesn't rot. So the first thing we do is we cut it. And the correct way to do it is to sort it, what needs split on one end, what doesn't need split on the other end. I usually just, by myself, I'm in a hurry, I just throw it all together. Then later on I come back through with the log splitter, and I split it and rank it and put it right back where it was. And it'll stay here. This woods, that's another thing I should say, this woods is very wet. There's almost a creek that runs through this woods. It's dry right now. Most of the year there's water. There's a bog in the middle of this woods. A lot of times you can't cross it. It's dry right now. So this is the time of year to get your wood out. But I began splitting with my brother's little Papex splitter and little Honda 200. And some of the logs chunks were so big I couldn't pick them up. So I had an aluminum ramp, and I would roll them up on there. And that splitter took 2 guys to run it. 1 guy to hold the wood, 1 guy to run the lever. Elmer liked that. He sat on the tire and ran the lever. But after the first year I thought, you know, I'm going to wear my brother's splitter out, I'll get my own. So I bought a Cub Cadet log splitter, and that was one you could stand it up. So that made it nice for that big stuff. And it was a little bit wider than the 4-wheeler, and I kept getting stuck that winter with the 4-wheeler. I'd have to unhook it and rehook it, and I told my wife, I said, I need a bigger 4-wheel drive 4-wheeler. My wife kept kidding me. She said, you keep spending all your wood money on toys to make wood. But I knew someday I would catch up, and I would be on the other side where my equipment was paid for, and I would be making everything would be on the plus side, or the black end of the deal. So anyway, probably went 10 years with that splitter. And then the wheelbase was wider than, I did buy a four-wheel drive four-wheeler Honda Foreman, very nice machine, manual transmission, excellent for getting in here to split and to cut. And but the splitter wheelbase was wider than the four-wheeler, so it made it cumbersome. You had to watch where you turned, you didn't get caught on things. The other thing was it is a siphon type carburetor. You could never run it out of gas. When you first got it out in the fall, you cranked and cranked and cranked and cranked to get the thing going. Cold weather, it really didn't like too well, and unfortunately I do a lot of this when it's really cold, so sometimes it was hard. I'd start it in there and let it run all the way back here to get it warmed up. So I had a friend that wanted a log splitter, and so I made him a deal on it and I sold it. And I bought another one, a newer Cub Cadet, narrower wheelbase, a different type carburetor, has a fuel shut-off, you can run it dry. Actually has, the other one didn't have throttle control either, it was just screaming all the time. This one has throttle control, I can idle it, I run it at an idle, saves fuel. This is just a wonderful splitter. I had two for a short time, and then I just recently sold one to my nephew. Didn't have enough people to run both, but wonderful log splitter, does a beautiful job. So now, fast forward, once the wood is cut and split, I do that in the winter time. That's my winter sport. Between things, I'll come out here. I enjoy working out here in the winter when it's cold. I can stay warm, usually, moving. And there's always stuff falling down. And oh, I should go back to logging. Eldon said every 7 to 10 years you should log a woods. And what you should do is stand back and look at the woods, and the trees that stick way up out of the canopy are the mature trees. Those are the ones that are going to get taken down when you get a wind. The wind comes along and grabs those trees and it will break them off and you'll lose them. So it's your best interest to harvest every 7 to 10 years and remove those trees that are sticking way up out of the canopy. The other thing is to be selective in how you do it. You don't want to open up your canopy to let sunlight in. If you let sunlight in, you get briars, undesirable crap growing, and that just ruins your woods. You've probably seen woods that have been, I would say, massacred, where they cut everything down to this, and now it's just nothing but briars and little scrub stuff. If you want to maintain a woods that looks like this, with mature trees, very little undergrowth, you have to selectively harvest it carefully. We have done it 3 times now. The first year was 148, or first harvest was 148 logs, and the last 2 harvests were probably in the 50 to 75 log harvest. This woods, and different woods have different species. This woods here has a lot of red beech, some red oak. There was a lot of ash, and you know about the emerald ash borer that has pretty well wiped out the ash trees. The last time we were in here, we tried to clean up all the ash trees. There were some dead ones. They bored them to test them to see if they were good. If they were good, we hauled them. If they weren't, they're standing, and I'm taking them as I get to them. If they're vertical, they last for firewood longer. But anyway, in the summer months, the trees suck up the water. It dries this woods up. And so after we're done making hay, or between cuttings of hay, in a normal year when we have enough labor, we start hauling. And usually we'll start hauling late July, early August, when we have time hauling wood in. And we haul it in, and we used to rank it in the shed and stack it. This year we've had labor issues. We had late planting. My wife broke her leg, which exacerbated the labor situation even worse. I don't know if we had any wood hauled before mid-August. I think that's when we started. And then it's like, well, what am I going to do? You know, I can't possibly accomplish this task in this little window, because now it's silo filling time. Now it's go time. There's no time for this. This is just an occasional thing. So I thought, I'm going to use my dump truck on my pickup. And I got everything I had along the woods, along the edge, everything I could back into, put on my truck, backed in the shed, hit the button, and dumped it. I dump a few piles, take the skid steer, and mount it. And I didn't want to put pressure on my outside walls and knock my shed apart, so I tried to keep it in the center, and I put some pallets along some equipment I had in on the one side, so it's kind of haphazardly mounted in there. The neighbor wanted wood. He's been getting it also right along. But we're getting it narrowed down. There's probably 6 piles or less, and we got a little time here, maybe before this rain comes, and we're going to see if we can get a quick load in. But anyway, it's just a little added income. We have lots of property we farm. There's always trees along the fence rows that need cleaned. Our chipper is great for that, but there's always some firewood. It's like, you don't want to just grind up all the firewood. You don't want to throw it in and let it rot. So we market it. And we have loyal customers that come back every year. We operate on the honor system. They come and get the wood, put the money in the can. Makes me happy. So I guess that's the Woodlot enterprise in a nutshell.